All right, welcome everyone. I'm going to take a moment to get into a comfortable posture. That might be a good thing to do. We'll start today with a meditation, as we always do. Meditating is a good way to get the mind ready to receive the Dhamma. You might take a moment to take a few deep breaths, really lengthening the exhale. Just letting go whatever attention or stress you brought in here with you. Letting the body relax. And as the body relaxes, the mind tends to follow. And on your own time, you can let the deep breathing go and return to a more normal rhythm. But continue to cultivate that attitude of relaxation. It's so easy to become caught up in effort when we meditate. There's often the belief that there's some goal to be accomplished, some state to be attained. Meditation is about just being present. Let that be the attitude for this meditation. Relaxation, just being present with what's here. If the mind feels pretty stable, pretty able to remain present, you can simply let it be, not do anything further. If the mind is agitated or upset or caught up in a spiral of greed, you might set the slight intention to focus on the breath. This produces circumstances that are more conducive to being present. The breath is fairly neutral compared to thought. There's less for the mind to be upset about or worried about or greedy for. Neither one of these ways of meditating is any better than one or the other. The skillful thing to do is dictated by circumstances. And circumstances that the mind is agitated and doesn't want to be present, the skillful thing to do is give the mind an anchor like a breath. If the mind is happy to be present on its own, the skillful thing to do can be just to be present. You might notice if there is any resistance to the present moment. This can show up in the form of agitation in the thought energy or contraction in the mind or as tension in the body. Let's see if you notice any of those things, and if so, there can be some relaxation around that. There's no need to force anything. Sometimes relaxation will come. And sometimes it's as simple as noticing where you're clinging and just letting go. In this meditation, I'm going to point out a couple of things that you may want to notice. You don't need to spend a lot of effort on them. Simply consider, let it go, return to your meditation. You might take a moment to notice the mood you brought in with you when you came to sit. Notice what it's like in this moment. Perhaps you recall what it was like as you sat down on the cushion. Take a moment and contrast what you're feeling now to what you think you would be feeling if your mood was something completely different, perhaps even the opposite of what you're feeling now. So if you're feeling very peaceful, contrast what you're feeling now with what you've experienced in the past when you've been very angry. And simply let that go and return to meditation. In this moment, you're in the vihara and hearing the air conditioning and a faint siren in the distance, hearing the sound of my voice, ringing in my ears. I hear a bird chirping. Those of you in the vihara may be hearing something similar. Those of you online may be hearing something different. I might take a moment to see how what you're hearing affects your present moment experience. Perhaps you had some reaction to the bird or the siren. Perhaps not. You might also consider what circumstances would be like if they were different. If, for example, you were trying to meditate in the middle of a heavy metal concert. Just take a moment to feel into what the difference in your experience might be like. Always letting the act of meditation be one of ease and relaxation, allowing and welcoming, letting go of any tension that's crept in. You might take a moment to feel into your experience of meditating with this group, what it's like to sit together with the seven of us, all of us being on the same path, moving towards enlightenment, wanting the world to be a better place. You might feel what that's like to sit in that kind of supportive environment. You might remember what it's like to sit on your own, sit by yourself. You might take a moment to contrast the two. you all for sitting with me. One quick announcement before we start. I think you guys have heard this, but for the folks who watch on YouTube, there's a Sangha brunch on the 20th at 10 a.m. And there's you can find more information on the website. So I'd like to talk about something tonight, and I'd like to illustrate what I want to talk about with a metaphor. So in this metaphor, imagine you're living in this great, great big garden. There's many, many plants and trees, and it's got statues and water features and bird feeders and all sorts of things. But you spend your life in this garden. Perhaps you can see the outside, and sometimes birds fly in, or the wind blows some trash in, or something like that. But you spend your life in this garden. And during your life that you spend in this garden, you can either tend this garden and nurture the plants and take care of the statues and fountains and such, and make your experience a lovely, pleasant place, or you can not tend the garden and you can let it go fallow and have your experience of living in this place be not so pleasant. This is a metaphor for our life. You are not separate from the world around you. The circumstances in which you live, this is what makes up your lived experience, and that comes directly from the world around you. So what circumstances you live in, and I mean circumstances in the larger sense, not just the kind of physical environment you're in, but the mental environment and the social environment you're in too. This is what your life is made up of. And if you tend to this, just in the same way as the garden metaphor, if you tend to this, your lived experience will be much more pleasant than if you don't. There's a mistake that folks often make when they come to Buddhism. I think people hear the teachings of the Buddha around equanimity and allowing things to be just as they are, and they think that nothing needs to be done or they shouldn't do anything. But this is incorrect. Equanimity and allowing things to be just as they are lovely and very skillful things, but there's also the fact of the matter that your actions in the world, whatever they are, have effects. And so, sometimes equanimity is appropriate, but, for example, when you walk off the curb into the road and you see a bus coming, the thing to do is not to cultivate equanimity about being run over by the bus. It's to step out of the way. So this is what I want to talk about tonight, how to act skillfully in a way that kind of cultivates the circumstances of our life so that we can live a happy and fulfilling and flourishing life. There's a teaching in the Dhamma that I've mentioned before, the four great efforts that applies here. So there's four efforts, and they're all related. So the first is not doing things that cause unwholesome mind states to occur. And the second is, if an unwholesome mind state occurs, doing what you can to help that go away. And the third is doing things that help wholesome mind states arise. And the last is, if a wholesome mind state has arisen, do things that help perpetuate that. And so if this life of ours is a dream, it behooves us to do this, to kind of help the circumstances around us make the dream a pleasant one rather than a nightmare. So when we talk about tending our metaphorical garden, we can think about all sorts of things. We can think about tending to our physical surroundings. One of the things that surprised me when it came up in practice. I started noticing this a few years ago, is that how important it is, or how much of an effect it has to have a clean environment. For many years I was quite messy, but as I became mindful of of how I felt about things and how my reactions to the world, I started to see that coming home to an apartment that was where there's stuff on the floor, maybe like dirty dishes piled up in the sink, it wasn't the end of the world or anything, but there was this little twinge of discomfort. And when you spend so much time in your apartment or your office or something like that, that can really add up over time, just these little bits of discomfort. So this is, when you guys come here on Tuesdays, before you guys come, I clean up the place a little bit. I vacuum and sweep if it's needed. I put flowers on the altar and take away my dirty dishes and stuff from the table. And that's because it makes just a nicer environment to be in. There's less suffering. So we can also think about kind of our exposure to excess noise. Like there's been like a fair amount of studies on how road noise, traffic noise, can cause a lot of stress in your life, and that's true of being around lots of loud music, or just people making a lot of noise, or things like that. And there's similar things that can be said in terms of having like an unhealthy kind of air environment, a little pollution in the air. That also causes stress. You can think about the physical body. Like all bodies like to be moved in some way or another, and doing that in a way that's healthy and feels good to us is a skillful thing. It makes our lives better. You can also talk about what we eat. And I'm not here to tell anyone how they should structure their diet, but I'm certain you'll all agree with me that there's a difference between if you spent a month eating healthy, whatever that word means for you, as compared to you spending a month eating a box of donuts every day. I guarantee you will feel differently in those two hypotheticals. And so it's skillful to do the healthy eating, because that makes us that conditions us to feel better and to be in a better mood and to have a better affect and outlook on life. And I think we all know these things. Like I don't think that was news to anyone, but the thing that I think happens is that we may make these choices, we make them instinctively. We want the cookie and we eat the cookie, and we don't put it in the context of the larger picture of building a life that we want to live. And I think we do that to our detriment. Just as we talk about the physical surroundings, we can also talk about our mental surroundings. So our body likes to be moved, and our mind likes to be exercised too. Minds like creativity, exploration, and learning new things. And whatever that means to you, it's good and skillful to do that. We feel good when we're engaged in the world that way. We can think about our patterns of mind, our habits of thinking. And some of those can be skillful, but many of them are just not. They're just not helpful. And those are things that we can change. It often takes some effort, but they're things that can be, if we tend to them, if we tend to our garden, we can switch those patterns of mind. There's a sutta, the Kim Sukha Sutta, that talks about something that you guys may have heard of, guarding the sense doors. I will read part of it here. So this is the Buddha speaking. He says that, imagine, monk, that there were a royal frontier fortress with strong walls and ramparts and 6 gates. In it would be a wise, experienced, intelligent gatekeeper to keep out those he didn't know and to let in those he did. A pair of messengers coming from the east would say to the gatekeeper, "Where, my good man, is the commander of this fortress?" And he would point the way. The pair of messengers would deliver their accurate report to the commander and would then go back by the route which they had come. And so he says, "I've given you the simile, monk, to convey a message. The message is this: the fortress stands for the body. The six gates stand for the six sense gates. The gatekeeper stands for mindfulness. The pair of messengers stands for tranquility and insight. And the commander of the fortress stands for consciousness." So this is a teaching, and I think this is counterintuitive to many folks, but the idea that we should be kind of like picking and choosing what we engage with, but it's really quite skillful. And just in the same way that we put food into our body, and that determines what our outcomes are going to be to some extent. The stuff that we watch and listen to and read changes our experience in the same way. I gave the hypothetical of that eating healthy on one hand and eating a box of donuts every day on the other hand. You can do the exact same thing with imagining what your life would be like if you abstain from the news and the unhelpful parts of social media and the unskillful TV shows and music and such that you might listen to. If you did that for a month, on the other hand, you can imagine if you just totally indulged in those things for a month. Your experience would be different. Your experience would be different. And so it's skillful to let mindfulness act as a gatekeeper. When something is, when you have the opportunity to let something in, you should think and see if maybe this should be let in or this should not be let in. And I'm thinking particularly here in terms of media. I have many examples of this in my life. Just all sorts of things that practice has shown me are not very helpful to me. And I'm thinking of things like scary movies and seeing the residue of fear that watching one of those leaves in you. I'm thinking of I used to listen to like some angry music when I was younger because I was not feeling like I had a lot of control over my life, and that kind of provided that feeling to me, and seeing the way that that continued to come up for many years, even after I stopped listening to that sort of thing. The things we experience become memories, and the memories come up again and again. So it's skillful to be choosy about what we spend our attention on. We can also talk about karma. This is a very, very impactful thing to your life. Karma is it's kind of complicated, but it can be kind of complicated. But in this context, the way you might think about it is karma is like planting seeds. So everything you do with intention, which is like much of your like physical actions and almost all of your thoughts has intention behind it. Everything you do with intention produces karma. And the way karma works is it's like planting a seed. You do the thing with intention and you plant the seed. And if conditions are right, the seed will sprout. Conditions are not always right. Seeds need water and sunlight and whatever, and sometimes they don't get that. So sometimes your karma doesn't sprout. But if it does sprout, what fruits from that is going to be the plant that was planted. It's not going to be something else. So if you do an action with good intention, what fruits from that is good karma if it fruits. If you do something with a bad intention or unkind intention, what fruits if it fruits is bad karma. And karma completely permeates our life. It's a factor in all our habitual reactions to things, which are, all the time we're reacting to something out of karma. And so coming back to this garden metaphor, you can imagine if you spend your life planting, acting with good intention, planting this good karma, the fruit that will produce is a life that's permeated by good karma. And that's a very, very powerful thing. So finally, I think maybe the biggest and most important thing I want to talk about today is that maybe the biggest component of our lived experience is the connections we have with other people. Nurturing connections with folks is a part of practice. It's probably the most helpful thing we can do for ourselves outside of sitting practice. There's a famous study, the Harvard study of adult development. I think it's like the longest running study in, I don't know if in America or maybe ever, but it's been going on for almost a century, and it's studied this group of people, and now it's studying their descendants, and it's looking at all the different different aspects of their life and finding what leads to happiness. And so I've heard the head of this study, Robert Waldinger, who somewhat coincidentally is a Buddhist priest. I've heard him talk a couple of times, and the thing he always mentions is that the thing that people who come to the study find surprising is that once you pass a certain bar of material resources, so you're able to get yourself food and have some shelter over your head, once you do that, the thing that's most important to your happiness is your social relations. So nurturing the connections around us is really a skill. It's it's something that comes naturally to some people, but for others like myself, it's something that we had to practice at. And it is something you can practice at and get better. The way that these connections are nurtured starts from just being present with the other person. So just being open to their experience, to be willing to feel what they're feeling, and doing so in a way that's where you're not putting your expectations on the other person. You're just letting them be how they are, and you're being open to that. This is so helpful to people. Everyone needs caring. Coming back to the garden metaphor, caring is like water. Every plant needs water, and everybody needs caring. And when you're present with someone, this is caring, because this when you're present with something, the subtext of what you're telling the person is that you matter. I'm spending my time and my attention on you. I'm not trying to gratify my own desires. I'm not lost in my phone. I am paying attention to you. And this lets them know they're important and have value. This is such a gift. The society we live in, it often doesn't treat people too well. Many people are treated in a kind of transactional way. They're only worth something if they can provide something for someone else. Many people are treated in a very very dismissive way, especially people who are lower on the status hierarchy. And so many people have no real outlet for caring in their lives, or maybe very infrequent. And that's really hard. You might have heard people talk about the loneliness epidemic. This is because people are not cared for. And it's so hard for folks because like when we go through life, we all have problems at some point. But when we have people we're connected to, people who care about us, people who will be present with us, we can share our problems with other people or with those people. It's not necessarily that they'll fix those problems for us, but we can face our problems with the knowledge that somebody else is in my corner, somebody else cares about me and may be able to help. That I think makes all the difference in the world. And when somebody goes without that feeling of being cared for, being connected to someone for a long time, I think those instances of not being able to share your problems with others or find help in others, I think those build up over time, and they just become very difficult, even if even if the larger circumstances are not terrible, even if this person has food and shelter and that sort of thing. And we can just do this. We can just give this to people around us, and just this caring and this presence. It doesn't have to be a big deal. It can just be you in the checkout line at the grocery store. There's often the pattern of like, hi, how are you doing? I'm fine. And that's it. You can have that same pattern. You can just ask, how are you doing, and really mean it, and really listen to that person's response, and just that very simple act is a really big gift. And we can do things like that. And when we do that, we make it a habit. Our circumstances, our garden becomes very very pleasant. There's this really interesting fact about trees that I learned a few years ago. I think other plants may do this too, but I know trees function this way. So it seems like trees are, they're separate beings, but there's actually trees are actually connected, at least sometimes. There's this thing called the mycelial web. It's this network of fungal filaments that links trees by their roots, and it does this very interesting thing. It allows the trees to, in effect, communicate. The trees can do things like, if one of them is being attacked by a certain kind of insect, they can send signaling molecules that tell the other trees that are connected to this network to, increase their chemical defenses or do whatever. And so they can, in effect, talk to each other in this thing, but they can also share resources. And what happens is that when trees are connected to this network, if one of them is not getting what it needs from the ground or whatever, it can take some of these the resources that are shared by other trees. So this is what we do with our connections. We when we're connected to other folks, we just kind of naturally share. We share our presence, we share our time and attention and resources. What happens when we do that is that we support the beings around us to grow and to thrive, just as the same way that trees that are connected with this mycelial network tend to do better than trees that are not. And that's true of people too. If we give them our attention and our caring and our connection, they will tend to flourish too. And because the people around us are so dispositive of our own well-being, if we do that, our well-being will be increased too. I think what you'll find if you as you do this regularly is that it becomes just a very natural thing to do. I was talking about harmony last week or the week before, and this is part of that. It's just when you act in this way, there's just this like very natural feeling of supporting others, and it's very very simple and straightforward and very very natural thing to do. So I like this metaphor of the tending our garden, just because I think it helps to put these choices that we make in the world, how to live in the world, how to kind of manage our circumstances, how to deal with other people. It takes these choices and it puts them in the proper context. It's so easy to just look at the cookie and eat the cookie and not consider the effects of that. It's so easy to just walk by someone and not acknowledge them. But when you look at those things in the context of, tending this garden, building this wonderful life for yourself, it really changes. It really changes how you approach the world, I think. Mm. And I think if we live like this, we all have the ability to create for ourselves a very lovely life. You know, there's a lot of circumstances that we don't have control over. And control is kind of a difficult thing to talk about in a Buddhist context anyway, but there's things that we can't do anything about. We get sick, we get hurt, um, we lose people. But if we approach the world with this idea of kind of tending our garden and just cultivating the circumstances around us, I think we can live a very lovely life. That's what I have to offer today. Thank you for your practice.